When we think about the big turning points in history, our minds usually go to wars, revolutions, maybe a brilliant invention. But what if one of the most powerful forces shaping human destiny has been the weather all along?
I mean, we tend to treat it that way, right? It's just the setting, something that happens in the background while the real drama of civilization plays out on stage.
Well, we're going to make the case that the atmosphere is so much more than a passive stage. It's an active participant. It's a main character, a force that can bring down empires, spark scientific breakthroughs, and literally redraw the maps of the world.
So let's dive right in. We're going to look at these incredible moments in time where the weather didn't just cause a bit of chaos. No, these are times when atmospheric forces fundamentally changed the direction of human civilization.
And look, we're not just talking about any big storm here. We're focusing on a specific type of event, what you could call a consequential weather disaster. This is when an event is so powerful, so disruptive, that it leaves a permanent scar or a permanent change on a society long, long after the skies have cleared.
And to really see how this works, we're going to take a quick trip through time. We'll look at 6 totally different disasters, and each one tells a unique story of how humanity either collapsed, adapted, or was forced into some kind of unexpected change.
We're covering a huge span of time here, over 1,000 years. We're starting with the Mayan megadrought. Then we'll see how relentless rain led to the Great Famine in medieval Europe. We'll jump to a massive storm in 1703 that accidentally created the science of meteorology, visit the American Dust Bowl, witness how a cyclone actually forged a new nation in Asia, and wrap up with the 2003 European heatwave, a serious wake-up call for our modern world. Let's go. First up, the Mayans. I mean, this was one of the most advanced civilizations in the Americas. They built these incredible cities, had complex calendars, sophisticated agriculture, a true powerhouse. So what on earth happened to them? Well, in short, the climate turned on them. Their entire society was built around very predictable monsoon rains, and then those rains just started to fail for decades. This wasn't just a bad harvest. This was a slow-motion catastrophe that caused their entire agricultural system to collapse, sparking wars over what little resources were left and leading to the abandonment of their magnificent cities. An entire culture undone by drought. So the Mayan collapse shows a society slowly unraveling. And a few centuries later, the Great Famine in Europe was a similar slow-burn crisis caused by years of rain and ruined harvests. But sometimes change doesn't happen over decades. Sometimes it happens in a single violent night. Let's jump ahead to 1703 England. A storm of unimaginable fury, basically a hurricane, slammed into the country. And its impact was, well, not what anyone expected. The destruction was just staggering. It even crippled the mighty English Navy. But here's the wild part. The most lasting outcome happened after the wind stopped. The storm was so huge, so unprecedented, that it forced people to start actually observing and recording the weather in a systematic way. And that impulse, born from disaster, laid the groundwork for the entire science of meteorology.
Okay, so a storm can spark scientific progress. But what happens when human error gets mixed in? Think about the American Dust Bowl in the 1930s. That wasn't just a drought. It was a disaster made 10 times worse by years of unsustainable farming. It was a brutal lesson. Now, let's turn to a disaster where the human factor wasn't the cause, but the tragic, world-changing aftermath, the 1970 Bula cyclone.
Just look at that number. Let it sink in. 500,000 people. An estimated 500,000 people lost their lives, most of them swallowed by a massive storm surge that just washed over everything. It's almost impossible to comprehend that scale of loss.
But the story doesn't end there. The cyclone hit what was then East Pakistan, and the response from the government, located far away in West Pakistan, was completely inadequate. That failure ignited absolute fury. It was the final spark for an independence movement that exploded into a brutal war and ultimately led to the creation of a brand new country, Bangladesh. Think about that. A single weather event directly led to redrawing the map of the world. Okay, let's bring it much closer to home now, to our own century, and a disaster that served as a massive, glaring warning sign for the entire planet, the 2003 European heatwave. And we're not talking about just a few hot beach days. Temperatures across the continent went completely off the charts, soaring far beyond anything in the historical record. The results were devastating. Over 70,000 people died, infrastructure buckled. It was a total system failure. But its real legacy? It was political. Before 2003, for many people, climate change was kind of an abstract, far-off idea. This heat wave made it real. It made it immediate. It was no longer a future threat. It was a present-day crisis. And that single event did more to accelerate serious climate policy in Europe than years and years of scientific reports ever could.
So, we've looked at droughts, storms, and heat waves across centuries. What's the thread that connects all of them? What's the pattern we can pull from all this devastation? Well, you start to see this incredible theme emerge. These catastrophes are absolutely brutal. They act like a harsh spotlight, exposing a society's deepest weaknesses. Whether it's bad farming practices that led to the Dust Bowl, or a total inability to forecast the Great Storm. But, and this is the key, that exposure often becomes the very thing that sparks innovation, forcing radical changes that might have taken decades to happen otherwise.
But let's be crystal clear about something. While progress can and does rise from the rubble, it always comes at a staggering human cost. The one lesson that screams out from every single one of these stories is that the price of being caught unprepared is devastatingly high.
And that brings us right here, to today. Why does looking back at a Mayan drought or an 18th century storm matter more right now than it ever has before? Because the game is changing. In the past, these kinds of events were often seen as sporadic, regional, maybe an act of God. But the science is telling us that the future holds something different. We're looking at a world where extreme weather is projected to be more frequent, more intense, and more global, all supercharged by human activity. And that's the whole point, isn't it? These stories aren't just history lessons. They are our data. They are a roadmap, written in the language of catastrophe, that shows us how societies break, how they bend, and what it really takes to build resilience when you're up against the awesome power of nature. In the end, it seems human history was never a separate story from the planet's climate. It's always been a conversation, a constant, ongoing dialogue between natural forces and human resilience. And the question that all of this history leaves us with is a simple one. As that dialogue gets louder and more intense, how will our chapter be written?